nice and quiet out here, which means that, of course, within the next 5 minutes, the birds are going to start screaming their heads off. I feel like I need to be more chatty in these videos when I do my book reviews, so I'll start with my current read that I'm working on. This is The Mammoth Hunters by Jean M. Auel. Third in the Clan of the Cave Bear series, which you all know by this point that I absolutely adore. This is really good so far. This is my Keeping My Sanity book that I'm reading alongside The Golden Notebook by Doris Lessing, which I was really into for the first 200 pages. And recently, I don't know, I got through the first 200 pages and I thought it was building to something and I thought it was really, really good. And now I am literally not even 200 pages in, 160 pages in is what it's more like. I am that far into it and I'm kind of realizing that I don't think it's actually building to anything and that it's just gonna be 600 pages of women being miserable because post-feminism and so on and so forth. So the writing is just gorgeous, but it's breaking my spirit a little bit. So cave person relationship drama is keeping me sane. Today I did not want to talk about cave person relationship drama though. Oh, this is the other disclaimer that I have to do for this video. I am aware that I wore this dress literally 2 videos ago, and I promise I have other clothes. I just have a washing machine, or I should say I rent a washing machine, and therefore I'm able to wear things more than once. And when it is this hot outside, I'm going to be wearing cotton, and I'm not going to change my clothes just because I'm filming. Anyway, none of that is relevant to what this video is actually going to be about, which is a book that I read recently that I think has kind of fixed some stuff in my relationship to witchcraft, which aside from that sustainability and witchcraft video, I haven't talked a lot about paganism or witchcraft on this channel. Honestly, I want to say that it was for important reasons. I know that I said in my sustainability and witchcraft video that I think that witchcraft is meant to be somewhat esoteric. But that's also kind of me coping because I actually, I had kind of a bad experience within the witchcraft and paganism community, which I may talk about eventually on this channel. If you guys were more interested in me doing Q&As, then that would be something I guess I could talk about there, but for now I'll leave it somewhat ambiguous what happened. But it had nothing to do with the fact that it was witchcraft or paganism or new age stuff at all. But basically, I don't know, I say that I've been practicing since I was 19, but 4 or so of those years were just completely dormant because of what happened to me. I think that one of my biggest regrets is that I did not stand my ground and defend myself, and that's all I'm gonna say about that. I'm willing to talk about that eventually on this channel, but suffice to say, I was treated very, very cruelly by a woman 10 years my senior who was very, very jealous of me and decided to spread lies. And no, I did not hex her in response or do anything like that because her life is pathetic enough that there's really no need to do any sort of drastic measures like that. But aside from that bad experience, I think there were other things that were troubled in my relationship to witchcraft that I think that this book that I'm going to talk about here today kind of fixed a little bit in my brain. So that book is Besom, Stang, and Sword by Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguire. This is basically all about traditional witchcraft. It covers, I feel like it covers all the basics, but in a way that is far more in depth than you usually see in a lot of books on the basics. I think that a lot of books on witchcraft tend to use very like evasive and imprecise language, like terms like energy and like vibrations and just like stuff like that, where it's like, I hear you, but like I don't know what you fucking mean. This actually like gets into what they mean when they talk about things like scrying and different forms of divination, that I feel like a lot of other authors just like kind of don't get into at all. I'll show you the table of contents here so you can pause it and see all of the stuff that they cover. This book found its way to me for literally $2 at a local used bookstore that I had a ton of store credit at, so I literally got it for free. It was already on my TBR. I don't remember what recently has driven me to pick witchcraft back up again. I was always like celebrating the Sabbats, but and like, you know, burning my incense to the gods and things like that, but I wasn't like actually doing the witchcraft portion of it. So I guess recently something in me has kind of healed, and I feel like I'm ready to get back that piece of myself again, because witchcraft and paganism has always felt very, very capital R right to me, and not right as in it is the easiest spiritual path for me to be on, but it is the one that is definitely like the healthiest for me and the most tough love. Yeah, basically I picked up this book for free from the used bookstore, and one of the things that immediately stood out to me about this is that it is specifically only talking about the witchcraft aspect of things. I think that so often you see books like this that are written by Wiccans, and like that's great and all well and good, but even though I use the names of the Wiccan Sabbats, I am not a Wiccan, and Wicca has actually really like strongly always repelled me. Like, it has never appealed to me. No hate to people who practice it. Some of the first witchcraft stuff that I learned was from Wiccans, so I am very appreciative of what they do. But for me personally, it has really never worked for me. And so getting to learn about just witchcraft and nothing else, and just purely focusing on the craft and not doing any of the god goddess wheel of the year stuff, really refreshing. I think that the other thing that was really refreshing about this was, I mean, I mentioned that they go into the actual details of what they mean when they talk about certain things. There is this frankness to this. They're just gonna say it, you know? I think that the way that they will lay out what they think and why they think it, but then also tell you in like a not fluffy way that you can kind of amend things to your own personal preferences and your own personal needs. I really appreciated that, because it's not like the anything goes, do what works for you, good vibes, like very like making allowances type of thing. It's very kind of unapologetic in a certain way, where they will give you all of their reasoning for why they think certain things are best practices. And there were some things that I disagreed with in this. My biggest complaint is that they advocate for littering in some places, like dropping small glass beads in the woods and things like that, and that I really strongly am against, obviously. I feel like they actually logic their way through why they think what they think. And that doesn't mean that I was literally taking every single thing out of this. But I really strongly appreciated that they were doing that. And when they were inventing things that, like, on their own, it actually felt like they had to put forth the effort to, like, explain it to you, rather than other people who sometimes will just say, oh, this is, like, ancient practice, and then they offer no citation and no other reasoning as to, like, why it's the best thing to do. Like, one of the things that they do is they literally explain to you physically how you actually scry. Like, they talk about how you need to let your eyes go out of focus, and they need to talk about what state of mind you need to be in, and literally how you get to that state of mind, as opposed to other people who just say, do scrying. And it's like, well, I literally don't know what that is. They literally talk about, like, psychologically, like, different types of brainwaves, and how when you're doing ritual, you need to be in a particular, like, state, like, in your brain, in order to, like, get the most spiritually out of that experience. Actually, I could be wrong. This actually sounds, call me out if this is, like, or call them out, I guess, if this is actually, like, pseudoscience, but they talk about the, like, the alpha, delta, gamma wave. So, like, gamma is, like, when you are, like, doing really, like, hard academic work, for example, and then alpha is, like, kind of between your everyday functioning and, like, being asleep, basically. They actually talk about, like, that kind of, like, really technical stuff, and, I felt that was really, really helpful and unique about this book. I think my absolute favorite thing about this, though, was the fact that this does not strip witchcraft of its edge. And when I spoke a moment ago about how I feel like in other ways, even if that one thing hadn't happened to me within the, like, witch pagan community, even if that hadn't happened, I feel like I also was at a point where I was stagnating a little bit, and where I was kind of getting, like, stuck in a rut. I appreciate that they do not try to strip witchcraft of its edges to appeal to Christians. I do feel like a lot of people within the pagan witch community are ex-Christians, and unfortunately, I think that a lot of that, like, those ideas get carried over into, like, their witchcraft and their practice. Like, for example, I literally just the other day saw somebody was sharing a spell, and they were like, oh, this, by the way, this doesn't work if you do it for an immoral reason. And, like, that is literally Christian guilt. Like, that is not what this is about. That's not what the craft is about. Because the craft fundamentally is about autonomy and freedom. And, frankly, like they say in this, like, witchcraft is about being ballsy and challenging yourself and, you know, taking risks and doing things that do make you a little nervous and do put you out of your comfort zone. And I think that that is the missing piece of, like, what I needed in order to come back to it and start actually fucking getting something out of it. Because for me, my personality and my tendencies are such that I very easily fall into the, frankly, like, the Catholic self-guilt. Like, I love really rigid rules. I find them so comforting. I am so good at punishing myself and abstinence and hiding away and being passive. Which may come as a surprise to many of you because, like, I'm an outspoken feminist on this channel, but, frankly, that is hard for me. It is hard for me to speak out, and you have seen me be hesitant about posting videos that I am worried will get me negative attention. I do have like that shyness in me that is just like, it would be so easy for me to get wrapped up in that wholesome 100, like trad cath, like I want everything to be pretty and bows and sunshine. And I have found that giving into that urge is extremely, extremely toxic for me, and it leads to stagnation, and it leads to me feeling like I am wasting my life, and it makes me psychologically never grow. This, they talk about like, well, listen, they straight up say this: witchcraft is not supposed to be wholesome 100. It's not supposed to be wholesome. And like when I read that, I actually felt liberated. I felt very grateful, because I think that a lot of people put pressure on themselves and kind of like fall into these cycles of self-punishment and anxiety, that our culture naturally imbues in us as women. They tend to fall into those cycles, and witchcraft becomes like a veneer for that. And it just makes them give into this like paranoia and like constantly looking for signals that they've done something wrong. And this is more like embracing the fact that witchcraft is about like developing yourself, and being willing to be brave and put yourself out of your comfort zone, you know, do things that are different and challenging and new. I think that was another thing that I really struggled with when I was doing witchcraft, was like, I struggled, despite being raised atheist, I did struggle with guilt for what I was doing. Like, I, deep down, I had this like paranoia of like, I'm gonna get punished for this somehow. And I feel like finally reading something that was like, I'm going to give you step by step directions for how to travel to the underworld and meet the Witch King in the forest alone at night. That literally freed me. Like, it's not something that I would personally do unless I was doing it with a buddy or two. That was way more comforting for me than all of these like Wiccan and like wholesome cutesy witch texts that try to be like, oh, remember, like we actually would never do anything morally bad. Like, that's just like a misconception. I really appreciate that in this they don't shy from those darker elements of witchcraft, because then it's like, when I was reading this, I was like, okay, finally, someone is treating me like an adult who can make my own choices. Because there were so many things in this that I would literally never attempt or do. They talk about deadly herbs in this, but they don't shy from talking about them. They do give you all of the cultural and historical information about them, like what they historically were used for, all the parts of the plant that are poisonous, and so on. But I appreciate being treated like enough of an adult to actually be given that information. Like, because it should be up to the witch to decide where they draw the line and what they're going to do with that information. Enjoyed that as well. I loved that it wasn't, frankly, religious at all. The other thing that I really loved about this, and that was super validating to read, is that they heavily emphasize the importance of being immersed in your actual physical location as a witch. So also furthering ideas that I've been having recently about how digital society and digital addiction and media addiction, like I guess a distraction addiction is what I could call it. I just came up with that now. Having that separates you from the spiritual world in a pretty significant and severe way. They talk about, like, you know, when you're making offerings, you don't have to overcomplicate it beyond something like a locally baked piece of bread, or locally made wine if you can access it. Which, side note, I just love the romance and the image of just keeping it simple with bread and wine. I think a lot of people are just like, they do these elaborate offerings where it's just, can I offer some of my McDonald's fries to the gods? And it's like, I think that sometimes the aesthetics are a little bit important in the spiritual realm, and so I appreciate just like bread and wine, bellissimo. We don't have to make it more complicated than that. I loved that, and they also talk about the importance of like buying locally and immersing yourself into the local economy and buying from your local witch shops before you go and like order stuff off of Etsy or Amazon or whatever. I also talk about not needing tons of really expensive equipment and instead kind of doing like the witchcraft on a shoestring thing where they talk about like, the best tools are the ones that you can make yourself. And this also is always something that I have incorporated into the craft, where the minute it turns into a consumerist collecting tarot decks and crystals thing is the minute that you are going to lose your connection to what is actually magic about it. So my approach personally has always also been in agreement with that, where it's like, if I can get it for less than $5 secondhand, then that is something that appeared because I am meant to have it. Like, it is in my path for a reason. I found, frankly, like, much cooler stuff to work with that way than, if I had, just gone on Etsy and, like, ordered what I thought would, like, look aesthetic or cool. Because really, when you are doing stuff locally and using what you can find in your local area, and they even talk about like researching your local area and the history, like acknowledging like indigenous history in the area, obviously without like culturally appropriating, but like being aware of that. And they even talk about looking into like local folklore and legends in your area and potentially like trying to work with those spirits when you are actually like doing witchcraft, as opposed to like getting wrapped up in trying to summon Celtic deities that you have no connection to personally, which slight call out for me because I do work with the Greek pantheon. But yeah, I thought that was incredibly wise, and I had never ever read anything like that before. I appreciate that they encourage you to develop a version of the craft that is truly rooted in you and your experience and your area, rather than just copying the cookie cutter Instagram influence that you see on Pinterest and Instagram and so on and so forth, because ultimately those are advertisements, and if there's anything that brings you further away from the divine, it's advertisement. They're kind of encouraging that like rough and tumble, like old pieces of wood and like pressed leaves you found in the forest and like rough stones that you actually find in the wild. Cannot honestly recommend this book enough to you. I think that if you are feeling a little bit stagnant in your craft, this is definitely one that I would highly, highly suggest you pick up, even if you don't identify yourself as like a traditional witch. Because I don't. I definitely have like pretty firmly my own thing going on. This is not something that I particularly identify with. I will say this is also, though, one of the first books on witchcraft that I've read where there were actually rituals that I was interested in doing. Really, really cool stuff in here. And it's elegant and simple, but not like boring simple. I think it is a perfect book for people who really just like want to be given all of the nitty-gritty details rather than reading something that feels like it is written almost as an apology for witchcraft. I think that what is gorgeous about this is the fact that it is completely devoid of any kind of like residual Christian guilt, and it actually feels a little bit spooky and forbidden to read at times. Yeah, spirit-based, non-religious guide fresh, it definitely feels fresh. Again, I don't even use all of these tools that they tell you to use, but I will say that there is a lot to learn in this. So for that reason, I just had to make a video to talk about it. I actually was originally going to wait and just do a like a larger reading wrap up, but I feel like there was enough to talk about with this. It needed its own video. That is Besom, Stang, and Sword. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you want more videos on witchcraft on this channel. That is definitely something that I am open to doing at this point. I'm not sure, I don't really have any like specific ideas, but if there are things that people would like to hear more about, or just things that people would like to see me do, like, I'm open to doing that. I don't know, I have some loose ideas, but nothing that is like super fleshed out yet. So yeah, I will see you next time. Thank you for watching, and yeah, bye.